confirmation. Well, good morning. I've talked to a couple of you, person to person. We got a decent little crowd in here, bright and early. Hope you guys are enjoying your breakfast. My name is Nate Cooper. I am the territory sales representative that covers Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas at Scale Computing. My right-hand man, standing down to the side here, hiding, cannot see him, is Jason Anderson. Yep. Let me trip and fall real quick. Good now? Better? Jason is our senior systems engineer, 15 plus years in infrastructure and technology. So he is going to be the tech guru here. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of who we are and what we do. The topic today, is integrated IT infrastructure for modern virtualization and edge computing. Let me go ahead and just kick it off. Are any of you familiar with who Scale Computing is? No? Perfect. Then this leads me into the slide. So Scale Computing started in 2008 as a storage company. In 2012, our founders realized that the traditional way of virtualization was inefficient, it was not cost effective, and it was becoming difficult to manage multiple vendors. So in 2012, we coined the term Hyperconvergence and rolled out our first HC3 platform. So HC3 is the combination of the servers, the storage, and the virtualization layers of the infrastructure into a single solution architecture. So over the years, we've grown very grassroots, word of mouth. You're not going to see Scale on Super Bowl ads, right? You may not be familiar with Scale, but all of those marketing verticals is how we've grown to have customers in over 30 countries. 15,000 plus systems are running today with 24 patents specifically around the software that runs on the infrastructure, on the hardware itself. So this is a VMware replacement. This is a traditional HP server running VMware or Hyper-V routing across multiple avenues replacement. We take all of those avenues of the virtualization and the infrastructure and put that into a single box. Our headquarters is up in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is where I am from, a Midwesterner born and raised. Our R&D is in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and we have got offices over in Europe, in the Netherlands, London, Toronto, in Canada, all over the place. So a couple of our technology alliances that you'll see on this screen, Intel, Lenovo, Acronis is our built-in traditional backup software that we've partnered with them really well. We stretch to VDI, so if virtual desktops are something that is of interest to you or what you do, Parallels is our built-in integrated company for that need. But really, what we're talking about today is going to focus more towards edge computing, but I would like to level set with hyperconvergence, right? What is hyperconvergence? I know I touched on it a little bit, but this definition is how we define it. You'll see other vendors out there define it a certain way. Scale as the ones that coined it. Hyperconvergence is that integration, right? Like I said, of the compute, storage, and virtualization layers of the infrastructure into a single solution architecture. How does that differ from the traditional VSA model, right? Well, you can see that traditional VSA model on your left. You've got your VMs on top, routing through the hypervisor all the way down to your storage level. Maybe you got a couple NASs, you got your networking layers. Costs a lot of resources to get up and running. Just to turn the lights on, in that traditional model, you may use anywhere from that 100, 300, 400 gig of RAM and 12 cores consumed just to support those virtual SANs. Well, at Scale, we've minimized that I/O path, right? So less than that in that traditional VSA model is what it costs to run on Scale Computing. And what does that mean? It means it's cost effective. It means it's simple. Go ahead.
I don't mean to be rude. Should we hold our questions to the end? Or
feel free. Go ahead.
So I've been in the industrial R&D. So I noticed you have Intel as a partner.
Correct.
What's your research position? This might be an NDA question.
Sure. Yep, so if you can see, and Jason's going to touch on this a little bit more once he gets into his technical part of the presentation. These are Intel NUCs. If any of you are familiar with these Intel NUCs, we have an agreement with Intel that is in the works, and this runs our HyperCore software at the edge, right? So in manufacturing, in distribution, in retail, in hospitality, there are resources and applications that need to run at the spot that that data is being consumed, right? We understand that things move to the cloud, right? Not everything needs to be run on-prem anymore, but there are certain, whether it's file servers, domain controllers, certain things that need to be processed at the edge. 3 of these bad boys can be placed at the edge and run all of those applications. No redundancy, there's redundancy, latency goes down, and it's built in DR, right? We build 3 node clusters. They're all built N+1. So what that means is if these are on a shipping vessel in the middle of the Pacific, middle of the Atlantic, and they're running 3 of those, if one of those goes down, they don't need to wait till they get back on shore to get a replacement. 2 nodes will continue to run what the 3 nodes were running because that's the way that the architecture is built. And like I said, Jason's going to get into that the secret sauce that's behind the covers. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to want to have follow-up to see
Absolutely.
where you're headed as far as supporting the design
Sure.
of future high-density, high-capacity cloud racks.
Absolutely. Yep, for sure. And we're going to be right outside. Feel free to swing by and we can get into it a little bit more detail. Moving on from that, that gets us into the HyperCore. This is the software, right? This is our software that we have patented. We have 24 patents on that first slide. I did not mention that, but the software is the secret sauce under the covers, right? So with the HyperCore software, it's simple, unified management. So if you're running things at the edge, everything is a single pane of glass. You can manage hundreds of sites from one single login, one single location. You don't need to go to every single place just to try to log into your servers, right? Unified management, the storage comes pre-configured. We build to order, so we have got thousands of different configurations, right? Since it comes pre-configured, the hardest part about setting scale up is rack and stacking after you get it out of the box. You plug in an IP address and you're up and running in less than an hour, creating VMs like that, okay? Scalability, pun intended, right? Scale is the name. You can mix and match these nodes as you grow. So as growth comes, you can start at a single node if that's where you need to start. Not redundancy with the single node. 3 nodes is where we typically start, but seamlessly being able to scale out. Just add a box. If you need more storage, add a box. Maybe you need something that doesn't have any NVMe, doesn't have SSD, right? Maybe it's all spinners. Add a box for storage. Very simple, very scalable. And then it gets me into the affordability aspect, right? When you're consuming less resources and you're needing less resources to run those applications at the edge or in your data center, as the complete stack owner, there is very minimal cost associated with that. We don't have VMware licensing. It's simple software licensing. So you pay for that software up front if it's through an MSP. We work through the channel. It becomes very affordable for the end user, for the partner, for everybody across the board. Availability, like I touched on briefly, it is self-healing. There is built-in backup, snapshots, replication in the system itself. I mentioned our partnership with Acronis. If you want more of a traditional integrated backup, we work very closely with Acronis, and they have a great product. But that is an overview of the HyperCore side of the business. I mentioned earlier, and I think Jason's going to hop up here and take over a little bit, but we can go very small in these Intel NUCs all the way up to a traditional 2U chassis in the data center. So there is a lot of flexibility depending on the project need and what we do. Jason, you want to talk a little bit more about the tech?
Thanks, Nate. So to those who were not in here at the introduction, Jason Anderson, Senior Systems Engineer covering TOLA with Scale Computing. Been working in the pre-sale side, more so on the partner side for about the last 11 years. So came over to Scale at the end of February. So as Nate was saying, we can kind of start off footprint this small, HE150, all the way up to the traditional, fully integrated dual core terabyte of RAM appliances. Where we want to kind of shift this presentation into is more about the edge that we were talking about, and that's kind of where the HE150s fit in. So how do you define the edge? There's a lot of different definitions for the edge. We kind of at Scale, we kind of define it as a mission critical application and infrastructure outside the 4 walls of the data center. I think that is a pretty good generalized definition of it, and we can kind of take that from here. As we were talking about earlier, some of the use cases that are prevalent within our realm, as we were talking about shipping, as Nate said, if you have devices off at sea for months at a time, you're able to communicate with those. There may be gaps in coverage in terms of connectivity. They can communicate back to a centralized location, centralized data center. Keep that information up and running. Keep that manageable for the entire duration of the voyage or the shipping or whatever. Retail, as I think we were kind of talking about prior to with Rich, prior to kicking off here, retail, if you have hundreds of supermarket chains or retail gas stations, whatever, if you need to run some workloads locally but don't want a full-fledged rack mount data center footprint in there, throw 3 of these in here. You're going to be able to run multiple VMs on those. You're going to have anywhere from 2 to 4 terabytes of RAM. 2 to 4 terabytes of storage, 16, 32, 48 gigs of RAM. They're not massive, but in a lot of cases, they're enough to get you through what you need to run locally at a particular site. Edge deployments, as you can see here, we kind of venture off from the traditional edge deployments. In some cases, you have physical infrastructure, virtual infrastructure, or what we have here is the 221. Anybody in here kind of, within your organizations or within your customer base started kind of dabbling or started in with, trying to define or deploy edge deployments? Anybody have experience within that in the room? Okay, well, okay. Okay, gotcha. And is this typically, will you typically see something like this, or are you starting to see kind of some smaller? Okay. Well, of course, right? Yeah.
The service providers want to see density at the edge.
Sure.
It costs them money if it's more complicated.
Absolutely. So, well, cool. That's great feedback. As we were talking to kind of revert back into these nooks a little bit, we were talking about deploying 3. You don't have to stop at 3. We can deploy as many as 8 in a cluster. So you talk about, well, that may not be enough resources for us from a 2 terabytes of storage standpoint, but you can deploy 8 of them. So you're getting 16 terabytes raw, 32 gig of RAM times 8 nodes. You have some overhead with the N+1 and the redundancy built in to give you high availability, but you can scale this out. It's not as small of a footprint as just 3 nodes. We can go up to 8. So something to keep in mind. And I think as you start scaling out to 8 nodes, a lot of what you'll see with the traditional deployments, I think from a resource perspective, we can be somewhat competitive, but then from an ease of management, much more competitive in that space. Again, a little bit more here. Scale computing platform. Again, the NUCs will run the same interface, same management platform as your dual processor 2U rack mount servers. So it's one IP address to get to these, to manage them, and it's going to be from a staffing standpoint. You're not going to have to retrain staff to manage your edge deployment as opposed to what you have in your main data center. They can communicate with each other. So what you have out at your edge sites can communicate and replicate back in to your main data center if you have a bigger footprint and need some, for whatever business continuity, disaster recovery, backup, however you want to define it, you're going to have some capabilities at that end. So what we've launched recently, and we'll get into here momentarily, and this is just a little bit more of trying to bridge the gap. As you can see, what typically will reside at the edge, the core, the cloud, and then what you see at the bottom, the web-based fleet management. So where fleet management comes in is, we're deploying and I know you get the term single pane of glass interface all the time. That's kind of worn out within IT, but it really is a single pane to manage all of your deployments. And where that's beneficial is, so say an organization has 100 sites. They deploy 100 3-node clusters. It's kind of not realistic to expect them, if they need to make a change, to go log into 100 different IP addresses to make that change. So that's what we're trying to do with fleet management. It's a single pane where you'll be able to track, monitor, and ultimately administer all 100 sites through one pane of glass. Go ahead.
So, this is pretty complex.
That's, no, you're fine.
I'm just asking questions. So, are your customers motivated to start looking at a digital transformation way of looking at things, like putting a digital twin representation that's operational? That basically through data analytics, the digital twin helps the customer manage a really complex Internet of Things laydown. Because it's hard to integrate, it's hard to stand up, much less operate potentially without a digital twin as a means to monitor and control the sensor.
No, I mean, I'll be honest, we haven't necessarily gotten into that too much yet with our customers. And with this slide and with the Internet of Things, a lot of times it does look complicated. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I agree. I agree. I agree. If you look at this, it's like, it's not a situation where we're going in and we're oftentimes integrating everything within that list. We're taking a certain subset of that, obviously, and working. But I see what you're talking about probably is down the road, and we probably will start getting more into that.
Especially for state and local customers, they want to have more sensors in for they can serve the private citizen better, but
Yeah.
they can't afford the cost of integration, much less management and sustaining
Yeah.
complex mesh sensors.
Are you talking about like smart cities, stuff like that? Yeah.
One city block at a time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think you have to, like you say, you have to take a small sample of it, almost treat it like a proof of concept, like you say, for a city block, and see how it may scale beyond that. So, certainly, no, that's valid. No, not at all. I appreciate the interaction. Like I said, I won't say this is a marketing slide, but it's somewhat of a marketing slide, and just from the sense that hey, it's oftentimes you're not going to go, folks, within the Internet of Things, you're not going to go see an organization that has everything top to bottom within this list down pat, and they've got it humming, and they're completely getting reads on all of it, and they need compute to manage all of it, so on and so forth. But I think this is a little bit of a vision and a little bit of, there's subsets of these different areas which we can play. So, as we were talking about, the fleet management, kind of able to manage, if you have 100 of these clusters deployed, able to go out and manage all of those through one interface. It's going to make updating those easier. Like I said, it's not realistic to necessarily, there's probably organizations that could do it or do it, but if you need to, touch each cluster from an update standpoint, asking your admin to go manage, hey, go touch these, go put 100 different IPs and go update 100 different clusters, that may not be the most desirable way of operating. So we recognize that, and we're trying to alleviate that and try to simplify things a little bit, despite what the slide may show. So anyway, again, more with fleet management, we kind of touched on that, what its purpose is, and how we're kind of rolling that out, and having a little bit of technical difficulty this morning in terms of getting out. I was going to bring up our lab fleet management, but I will show some screenshots of it here. And ultimately, we will have a cluster cabled up and operational at our booth, which is right outside the door. So please come by and see that later on. We'll have the NUCs cabled up, and then we'll have on the monitor the management interface, so you can come in, poke around, see what that's all about, and just kind of see how easy it is to kind of not just what Nate was saying, deploy it, but then also administer it on an ongoing basis. More with Fleet Manager, we're obviously kind of beating that drum. Simplicity is a big part of what we want to do with that. I won't repeat myself too much with regards to fleet management. I think we touched on everything that it does. So to shift off that, and I'll show a few screenshots here momentarily of what kind of the fleet management interface looks like. But just this is kind of going back to what the core of scale and what the value proposition is. Especially on the edge. A lot of times at these remote sites, whether it be restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, you're not going to have necessarily the most tech savvy folks on site in some instances. So the more simplified you can make things, go push this button, go unplug and plug this cable in, go power on, power off, the better operationally you're going to be. And it's not, a lot of times it's not the folks' job to be tech savvy at these locations. So, the more you can help them out, the better off you're going to be. Physical constraints, a lot of times if there's a install out in a remote location, can't get to it for a couple days or a period of time, you're going to be able to solve that with the accessibility, both from our management interface and then also the redundancy built in, connectivity outages. One thing that I think we didn't touch on, rolling upgrades. I know that's not necessarily unique to us, but it is a nice feature to have. With the starting at a 3-node cluster, you'll evacuate 1 node of the VMs, update it, then kind of wash, rinse, repeat for the remaining 2 nodes. And so you don't have to worry about, the traditional maintenance windows, outages, having people work evenings, weekends, so on and so forth. So that kind of alleviates some of the challenges and some of the undesirable administrative tasks around that. Unpredictable demands, we kind of address that by our ability to, no pun intended, scale easily. Like I said, we start at 3 nodes. If you want to add resources, we can add another node up all the way up to 8 nodes. So you can, you don't have to have exactly like nodes. So if you see maybe our additional RAM footprint wasn't what we thought it would be, you can add nodes with more RAM. You can add nodes with more storage than your previous nodes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know for kind of the data center, there's a set of kind of standards that people have to follow. I mean, do you find that your customers want you to adhere to kind of edge standards, or those standards for reliability and stuff not necessarily spelled out?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it'll depend on the organization, number one. And by standards, are you meaning certain levels of redundancy within the environment? Okay. Sure. Yeah. So everything we do from a 3-node cluster onward is all considered HA, high availability. The data is written in RAID 10. So there is a little bit more overhead maybe up front from a raw versus usable storage standpoint, but you're going to have the comfort knowing that if a node goes down, we're still going to have, assuming you're not overutilizing the cluster, from how it's built out initially, you're going to have the ability to get by and run all of your run all of your workloads on 2 of those 3 nodes. That's how we're designed out. So, is that kind of what you're looking for? Perfect. Okay. Fantastic. Anybody else have any questions, anything they've seen up to this point? Sure.
Are there any plans to kind of take what you're doing and integrate it in the future to, let's say, the emerging Web3 space? It's like there's a lot of growing demand for a decentralized system of nodes, especially like data storage. Particularly concerning like NFT projects and things like that are going to be running on the blockchain.
Sure. I don't have an answer to that, but please do come by. We'll get your information. We'll get with marketing and our product team. Not marketing so much, but the product team and roadmap, and we'll certainly get an answer for you. So, anybody else? Is breakfast good at least? So, okay. All right, good deal. Good deal. Like to hear it. So, a couple other things here, and then we'll show some of the screenshots like I was talking about of Fleet Manager. Scale support is all United States based. Scale is headquartered out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We do have an R&D facility in Silicon Valley, but our support is 100% based out of Indianapolis. I believe, Nate, is the average wait time to get an engineer on the phone a matter of seconds. Yeah, so call in. I've been through the realm, worked with HP in the past, worked with some other big providers. It's not always necessarily the quickest process, calling in support to get to talk to the engineer, the people you know to. So that is a benefit. As you can see here, one of our customers with JMA Energy, who I believe they are in the Tola, they're in the Tola region as well. So one of our advocates, he's always had great support with scale. He wished it was contagious and would spread to other vendors. So, whether or not he's embellishing a bit or not, as far as that goes, I don't know, but it's certainly nice to hear that from our customers. And go ahead, sir.
I mean, kind of building off what you just said, I mean, the sense that I have based on the presentation is you're really well supported by the Intel processor ecosystem. Do you have similar relationships with like ARM and RISC? I mean, are you going to try to demonstrate your virtualization products on other based, products?
Other processors? At this time, we're 100% Intel. Like I said, I joined Scale at the end of February, so I haven't necessarily gotten into the realm of what the future holds yet. I don't think that there's necessarily too much out there.
I mean, it's not a commercial motivation, I guess, for you to like worry about supporting your virtualization. Multiple kind of major
Sure.
type of process.
I'm sure that it is on the roadmap.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
Which I hate saying.
No, certainly. So very good questions, very good questions. So, I mean, stuff that I necessarily maybe hadn't thought about either, so that's fantastic. So, as we said, the support, 24/7, 365. Support is there with you. Like I said, the deployment's so easy. Go get a keyboard and monitor connected into one of the nodes in the back, IP it, initialize the cluster, you're off and running. Support will work with you through that if you wish, or send instructions. Software upgrades, support, you can call, schedule an appointment if you just, for the sake of comfort, want them to kind of be on the phone while you're doing it. Never a terrible idea. What they'll do is, and we can look at this once we get the interface up later today if you want to come by the booth, but they'll essentially provide a code. You'll create a tunnel back into HQ. If the time comes, they will connect into your machine remotely and essentially do the upgrade for you if you want. So beneficial, like I said, at remote sites. If you don't have somebody there or you're kind of staffing constrained across the board, that's kind of a pretty cool feature. Another thing with support, we were talking about earlier some of those traditional edge and really just traditional data center multi-vendor solutions. So maybe you have a Dell EMC, and this isn't singling anybody out, this is just naming names. So say you have a Dell EMC storage solution running on Cisco servers with a different hypervisor, VMware, for example. You may have to update your total solution, you may have 3 different upgrades you have to apply. Everything's contained one time. It's one upgrade within Scale, we own the whole stack. So you do that, you don't have to worry about compatibility from different versions. So it's a definite benefit there as well, and it kind of goes into our whole message of simplification. I would, I've heard this a lot in going through these presentations since I've started. We'd certainly encourage you to go out. I believe SpiceWorks is a prevalent organization as far as going out and see what other customers are saying. Would certainly invite everybody to go out and see what's being said about Scale out there. I think that I can sit up here and Nate can sit up here and talk about it, and that's great. But I mean, we're not going to come up here and badmouth our own product. So, if you want the proof, go out and see what everybody's saying. We certainly invite everybody to do that. So, again, we feel comfortable with what our reputation is out in the industry. We get very high scores from the peer insights, SpiceWorks, Trust Radius. So I think that's the proof is in the pudding to go out and check that out. We also have customer references within region. If depending on whatever the workload or use case is, we've probably got somebody doing it or something similar to it that we can put you in touch with. And we're happy to do so. So that is the presentation. One more thing real quick, we'll kind of show you the Fleet Manager interface. So let's get it to kind of the start. So here, well, that's not showing up. we may have to look at that later. So a little bit, but we can go through and look at that fleet manager interface. Yeah, we'll have that up at the booth. We can look at it later, no problem. So go ahead.
Could you post these slides?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I'm gonna use them, it's kind of a tricky board.
Sure.
You stop by, will you mind stopping by?
Yep, we can get that out there for you. So any other questions? Anybody else? Any questions? Ready for the key? What's next? The keynote, I believe. Is that what everybody's really in here for? No. Okay. We didn't know. So okay. You know, we sponsored breakfast, so we appreciate you doing that. So thanks everybody. This is a pretty solid turnout for 8 a.m. I feel like, especially I would think most of y'all are probably somewhat local, fighting through traffic to get here. Yeah, that's what I thought there would be. So I live in the Houston area, so I enjoyed the nice weather up here yesterday and getting out of the humidity a little bit. And I am well aware of traffic in both cities, so I knew it would be a challenge, but I think this is a pretty good turnout for what we had. And I hope you guys found at least some of this worthwhile. Like I said, we'll be out there all day. After we finish here, we're going to get these nooks set up, a cluster set up over there so you can come by and see what the fuss is all about. So anyway, thank you all.